We'd like to welcome everyone to the Lunch and Learn with the Master Naturalists and Master Gardeners. Today, for Unit 23, Hank Henderson will be presenting for us. We like to thank you guys for joining us today. My name is Chris Looking and Gail DeVilbus is on. We're the program coordinators for Unit 23. And again, we'd like to welcome Hank, and he's going to present on the life of a beekeeper today. So Hank, I'll let you go ahead and start and share your screen. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, unmute would be good there, right?
Yeah, and I'm gonna go ahead and we'll go ahead and if you guys will stop your videos, that way then Hank has a little more video time space, okay? We ask everyone to go ahead and thank you.
All right, I think you should be able to see this now.
Yes, thank you.
All right, everybody. Thanks, Christina. Here we go. We're going to do a little talk on being the life of a beekeeper. A little bit of a comic here, and again, a hobbyist beekeeper. So that's going to be kind of the focus of what I'm talking about today. A year in the life. And when Chris asked me to do this, I was really thankful that we kind of settled in on this, because this is more like what I like to do. Not try to be, we have so many experts that give presentations here through the Master Naturalist, Master Gardeners. So I am going to condition mine, that mine is being as a hobbyist and not really like an apiculture scientist. I do not claim to be that. And I also found that you can find all kinds of presentations online, some wonderful presentations that get into so many things from some real experts. So mine is going to be at a very, I'll say, ground level, generalist level. But if you wanted to, you can dive off into so many things about beekeeping and how to become a beekeeper and all kinds of things. But just to make it official, and for Gail's sake, I did one slide with a few numbers on here. So you can see around us in our region, the numbers of beekeepers who are registered with the state. And in Illinois, if you're a beekeeper, it is the law that you register. It's free. And so probably some people don't. But you can see around us the different counties in blue, how many beekeepers there are and how many colonies. I mean, they call them colonies. That's how many beehives they have. But you can also see as of a couple of years ago, there were almost 5,000 registered beekeepers, and they're apiaries. So that's kind of their bee yards, and which they managed about 35,000 colonies in Illinois. And in the US, they think there's about 125,000 beekeepers. All right. So just a little bit more about me. So how did I get into this? When we had moved here, I have a neighbor down the road, Mr. Don. And he is a strong proponent for beekeeping and also gardening. And he kind of just gave me my first setup of bees after we had lived here a couple of years. So, but the important thing here is that he has been my mentor all this time. And so I ask him questions, I bounce things off of him. Now I help him with his bees, and he's helped me a lot. And the whole kind of neighborhood, we have a lot of beekeepers that he has started, and he's been there for us. So that's really important. So, and I don't know if anybody has questions, if you want to, I know sometimes they put them in the online, or if they just want to ask or how we kind of track that. Maybe Chris can kind of keep up with that for me. So anyway, here's a picture of Don. And real important. And then he's the one that kind of talked about how you could make a small fortune in beekeeping if you started with a large fortune. And so over the years, he just kind of chuckles and laughs as he's seen me let my hobby, I'll say, kind of get away from me. And so from having like one hive with him, I've grown and grown, and Laura can tell you each year sometimes I add a few more hives, and I now have 25 of them. And I didn't even realize till I was putting this presentation together that moved me from being a hobbyist to a part-timer. So I might have to drop back down to 24 so I can call this a hobby. And I will say that You know, being a beekeeper provides all kinds of diversions and fun and frustrations and lots of things to do. Obviously, everybody on the call today knows how great bees are as pollinators and how we're trying to protect them, all our pollinators. So, you know, we have a nice property for that, and Lori's just only made it better and better for helping our pollinators. And then, you know, one of the things you get is you get some honey out of it all. So I will say that over the years, I've been able to get enough honey. And at some point a few years ago, you know, Lori said, what are you going to do with all this honey? It's in the basement. I mean, how much can we eat? And so I did have to kind of reach out, and I have a little small business here in Trenton with some people that sell my honey. And I'll say that it has paid for my hobby. And so far, so good. It's been able to do that. But I know some people can have some real frustrations with beekeeping because there's a lot of, like anything else, there's a lot of things that can happen and can affect how you're doing. All right, so that's too much yakking. I'm going to go into the year of a beekeeper. I'm starting in winter, the dark days of winter. And as a beekeeper, there's really not a lot to do in the wintertime, except maybe you can worry about them. But the bees are kind of hunkered down in their hives. You hope that you came out of the fall with a healthy hive full of bees, and they've got food and pollen, and they kind of settled in there. Literally, the bees live longer. I'm going to say the ones that do live through the winter, they live longer versus the summer when they just kind of work themselves to death in a matter of weeks. But in the wintertime, the ones that can last will last the whole winter. One thing that frustrates me as a beekeeper, and there are scientists trying to figure this out, but how would you measure how healthy they are? You can kind of see that you have a lot of bees in a box, but you have it's a little bit harder to measure. Are they really healthy enough to handle the cold that's going to come? But here's a picture of our bee yard, and you can see I put a lot of things to protect around the bees and block the wind. But you know, when you have these big snowstorms, you just kind of wonder what's really going on in there. And what is going on, I grabbed this picture from the web, but this is a bees cluster in the winter. So they try to get as close together, and literally when this beekeeper split these two hives apart, that would have been one big cluster of bees, and they're trying to stay warm. And I've heard it compared to those specials you see about penguins and how they're all in a big cluster, and then they kind of have some system to move in and out and from warmth to cold. But what happens during the winter is some of them do die, and that's just, I guess, what they know is the fact of life. In the wintertime, you know how we have some warm days, and one of the things I've learned over the years is to supplement their food. So I've got a picture here. You can see there's some Ziploc baggies, and that's it's sugar with a little bit of moisture. I've learned just how you need a little bit of moisture in there, and I'll take the top off the bees and literally set it on top of the beehive. And I have some cuts in it, or the bag is open, and most of the hives, the bees will find that and they'll eat that honey. And so we've learned to supplement how much honey you left them for the wintertime. Also, on warm days, and I'll feed them maybe the beginning of January, whenever it's warm. When I say warm, it really needs to be in the mid-50s and not much wind. And same thing in February. But also on these warm days, you'll see bees flying around, and they're actually out doing a lot of, they call them cleansing flights. You can imagine what they're doing when they've been cooped up inside for weeks and weeks. And you see evidence of that. And then also mortuary action. So the bees will be carrying out the bodies, the corpses of the ones that haven't made. So they will take full advantage of a warm day, and you'll see bees just working to clean things up and get things ready before it gets cold again. So that's kind of what happens in the wintertime. And despite that, as I kind of start to get into spring, and I will lose beehives. And I think on an earlier slide, I showed that nationally, They track how many hives are lost during the winter, and the average is somewhere between 30 and 40% every year. So it's a pretty heavy duty toll. I have experienced that a number of times, and you can see it by state. Down south, it's not as bad as it is, and it's worse up north. One of my big beekeeper friends here in Clinton County lost 40% this winter. I lost 20% of my hives this winter. It's sad when you see them, and I can't really, I take part in some surveys, some data surveys, and they ask, what do you think killed them? And I really don't know, just the cold weather, because every bee hive I've lost had sugar and it had honey, but I do not know what happened to them. Were they weak, and did they just succumb to some really cold weather? So kind of, I'll say, a mystery, and it's sad, but it's not unusual at all. Also, a good beekeeper, so maybe not me, would work on their equipment during the wintertime. And so here's some pictures, and I'll probably have to confess these aren't during the wintertime, but I might buy some additional equipment. I might do some repairs. I might put boxes together. I don't make my own equipment, but I'll buy it unassembled, and I'll put it together and paint it. There's a picture here of putting frames together with the wax foundation. So that's something else you should do in the wintertime. All right, we're going to roll into spring. And like everybody on this call, when spring comes, you've got so many things you've been thinking about during the winter, and so many things are going to happen in your gardens and in your yard. As life just kicks into big gear, and that happens with honeybees also. They really are ready for stuff to happen, and you'd be amazed at watching bees come back to the hive with pollen and it's really not officially spring, and they're finding pollen out there. They're bringing food. As things start to grow and bloom, the queen starts giving signals that she is ready to start doing things and build up the colony again. So she makes a decision that she's going to start laying eggs. She hasn't really been doing that during the wintertime. And that starts, a job for everybody. There's the eggs to tend to, and the nursery workers are busy doing that. She sends the foragers out, and people start bringing in nectar and pollen. And then the crazy thing for beekeepers is that the queen also has, instinctually, they want to continue their families, and they will, what we call swarm. They split the hive at least once, and she takes off with about half of the hive and starts a new nest somewhere. And so to the bane of beekeepers, they try all kinds of things to stop them from swarming. It's a very natural instinct. I kind of gave up on trying to do some of the things that some beekeepers do, and I just kind of know that they're going to swarm, and I try to get out there and see if I can find some of those swarms. So springtime is the busiest time for the hive and the busiest time for a beekeeper. One of the first things I do in the spring is I feed them some syrup. So this is really like a 1-to-1 mixture of just sugar and water, and it's kind of a little kickstart for them. And what I've seen happen here, in our weather, you guys know how we have this crazy weather, and you'll have some warm days, and then you'll have some really cold days, or some really cold and wet days. And sometimes if the queen has kind of given the signal, let's go, and then we hit a spell of cold and wet days, it can really be hard on the colony because they're not really built up yet. And now we get cold weather. And so this is kind of my way to help them some when they're getting going. I kind of give them sugar water and get that going for a week or two, and just in my own mind, give them a little kickstart. And I have lost a hive of bees that I thought had come out of the wintertime, and then all of a sudden, right in March, early April, you'll find a dead colony of bees. And again, not quite sure what happened to them, but they just didn't quite make it through that last hump. And as we maybe had one more cold spell. after I've fed them for a week or two, then I'll take away those jars and then I'll put more of the boxes, the hive boxes on there. And that is one thing they say, if the bees are getting crowded, that maybe that helps make some decision to swarm. So that is a something to do. But it also, you'd like for them to know they've got more room to make honey, and they're not feeling crowded in there. All right, so since all this is about the queen, I grabbed a couple of pictures here just to let y'all see, anybody who hasn't seen this before, but I am not a real expert at finding the queens in my hives, and I don't really go rooting around for them, but here's just a couple of pictures. When the worker bees raise an egg to become a queen, they feed her what they call royal jelly, and it's just a special food they make. And they have picked, just, I don't know why or how they picked, but the queen doesn't lay a specific queen egg. It's the worker bees decide that, she's told them we got to raise a couple of queens. And so, but anyway, you can see the queen is much larger. And here's just a few pictures. The one on the bottom right, a lot of beekeepers, or if you buy a queen, they will have marked the queen so they can find her easier, because they like to keep up with them sometimes in their hives. So they'll mark them with different colors of paint. So this is some queen. So the queen is getting into gear. She's laying a lot of eggs. I got a few more pictures here just to show, but up here in the far left, you see these tiny little larvae. These are the little eggs that she's laid. That's not a queen bee there, but these are the workers that are starting to tend to that, and they're going to make sure they're going to feed those guys. And then you can see the larva growing in the next picture. All right. And once it hits a certain age, the workers cap. At this point, they're calling it brood. And here is a frame that's just nicely covered with a nice big selection of brood. And I forget now, but it's about 20, 21 days before those bees are going to hatch. All right. And then ultimately, bottom right, here's what you got. You got a frame just full of bees. And the queen, when she gets going, can lay 2,000 or 3,000 eggs a day. And she can do that her whole life. And so she can rapidly multiply the population of the colony. If everybody's healthy and they've got food and all these things are happening. And the reason why I'm showing that is because if she's decided she's going to swarm, she likes to build up the population in the colony, and she will start telling them, hey, everybody get ready, raise some queen cells. We're gonna swarm here. And she works to have them ready so that when she leaves them, they've got food, they've got babies, they've got eggs, and they can raise a queen to take over and keep them going. So again, from the internet, I'm sorry, this is kind of blurry, but on the right, you see these elongated cells. These are queen cells. So where all the other ones are capped brood, in this case, the workers are feeding this royal jelly, and then each one of these, they kind of, do the probability thing, and they might have 4 or 5 or 10 of these queen cells in the hive, and theoretically one of those will emerge maybe a day earlier than the other ones, and she might go along and kill the other queens in their cells before they have emerged, and so she becomes the new queen. I think with experience, I've learned that sometimes there's multiple queens and you'll have multiple swarms. On this other side, you can see they kind of show the difference, but there's some larger brood that's marked as drone cells, and drones are the males. Same thing, the workers can raise males, and so out of the thousands and thousands and thousands of bees in a hive, there's going to be a few hundred males called drones, and with only really one function in life. And so they know they need them, they just don't need too many of them. All right, so what's going to happen? She's going to give a signal someday that, all right, we are ready to go find a new home, and they will swarm. And it is an amazing time. It's right now we are in the middle of we call it swarm season. So I had my first swarm on April 15th. And usually what happens is you'll have some cold days, cool days, rainy days. And then when you get a couple of bright, hot, sunny days, the queen says, this is a good day to swarm. And she takes a number of bees out with her. They think it's like 40% of the hive. They fattened up on food before they left, and the queen's gonna fly out somewhere, maybe nearby, and land on a branch. And they're all gonna cluster around here while they send out scouts to find a new home. And if you can find them when they're in this mode, you can capture them if it's somewhere that's available to you, and you can help them pick a new home. But they're gonna swarm, and they just hang out. And I've seen them hang out on a branch for a couple of days. I've seen them hang out for an hour, and who knows how many I never saw that flew away into the woods and started a new family. But it's pretty fun to look for swarms. And I'm going to show you probably more pictures than you want to see. I think they're pretty neat. Actually, I got a little video here.
All right. These guys look like they're about to swarm or swarming. Let's hope they go somewhere easy to collect.
And sometimes when I walk out there, so what I'll do, and Laurie knows I do this, from about 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock during the day, and luckily I'm home, and in the last part of my career, I work from home, I'll just go out and do a swarm walk, and I'll just walk around and take a look around. And sometimes you'll see them getting ready to swarm. That's kind of unusual because you can walk out there and 10 minutes later, if you walk again, you might find a swarm and you saw nothing right before that. But sometimes, last week, Laurie was working in the garden and she called me and says, hey, they're swarming. You can hear them, you can see them. There's a bunch of bees flying around in the air, and they're kind of just waiting on the queen to settle somewhere. And then they're going to just clump around her. Wait a second. Okay, hang on. And I think I've got.
All right, I got a little bit of sunshine peeked out, and I said, let me come out here and see what's going on. I've already seen 2 swarms that I didn't take a picture of yet. And here's something swarming, and you can see on the tree over there. Holy smokes. All right, good.
And I took a couple of videos here, but you can see all these bees flying around in the air trying to figure out where they're going to go.
Swarm was on this plum tree, and now they're up in the air. So I don't know if it's a mating flight or if they're moving somewhere. I hope not up in that tree. No, they're going up on that tree, which is way up high.
The curse of a swarm. I've got a lot of pictures of bee swarms. Just to kind of give you, when you see a swarm, and let me stop here and say, when you see a bee swarm, probably most of y'all know they are very docile at this point. So when people kind of freak out, there's a bunch of bees that showed up somewhere and they're on a plant or on a T-post or in their tree. They are the most docile that they will ever be. And the theory is that they really only have the queen to protect. There's no honey, there's no house, there's no babies. And so you could literally just put your face right into the swarm of bees and they're not going to do anything. And so when people are excited about it or want to get their can of Raid out or do something to them, that is really not the time to do it. The time is to find somebody or just leave them alone, and they're going to fly away when they find a home. And so when I walk around and look, I can just kind of see these dark, big clumps of bees, and you can sometimes kind of hear a little hum out there, but I've got a lot of pictures of swarms. Last year, I caught about 30 swarms between me and my neighbors. This year, I've caught a dozen swarms so far. So I've got more swarm pictures than you can probably imagine. I use pictures kind of to help me manage my bees. I'll take a picture of a swarm and then a picture of where I'm putting it in a new hive if I'm keeping the swarm. So anyway, I think it's kind of neat, and they'll be in all sizes. Some of them are just a pound or two of bees, and sometimes I've had 8 pounders. That would be huge. But 5 pounds of bees, a pound of bees is about 3,000 or 4,000 bees. So you can get a lot of bees in a swarm. There's my neighbor. He had one there. And they will go everywhere. Here's some just down low near the ground, and sometimes they're up in the trees. And this would be a really large swarm. Yeah, that's on a little plum tree, and it's just bending the branch over. Little peach tree plum.
Sarah asked, how far will a swarm travel on average?
I do not know. I know I find a lot of swarms, and they're just right around the bee yard. And so we have different trees around. And so it seems like they don't travel very far if there's a place to go. And it seems like they'll go to the same trees. I don't know if that's because there's a little scent left from a previous swarm or what. And I don't. And the reason why I say that, because you don't know which one just flew away. It just flew away. And Lori found one last week, and it was probably a couple of 100 yards away from a hive of my neighbors that he thought was going to swarm. And she came down the road and called me and said, "Hey, there's a swarm up here at the railroad tracks." And so there were, the closest hive was a couple of 100 yards away. So I have seen them then just take off. But in general, I feel kind of lucky that the queen does not go very far. And I don't know if she's just like, okay, I don't really need to go far. I just need the scouts to go out and find us a new home. These are a couple of big swarms that were up in trees, up high in trees. And sometimes you think you're seeing a swarm.
Well, that's wild. As I speak, it's gone. It all came down here. I hope it's a mating flight. That's what I hope.
All right, so in this case, I had a swarm up in a tree. I thought, oh, I'm going to catch that swarm. And as I was getting ready to go out to capture it, it lifted up, and I said, oh, I'm too late, it's flying away. And then they came back to the hive. And so I'll back up here a little bit. When that queen leaves, she's the older queen. And so I always kind of say you got 2 kind of time clocks going. So the older queen in all these pictures we're seeing, she's got a bunch of workers with her. But think about it. They got to find a home, draw out some wax and make all the little wax cells to build inside their home where she can lay eggs. And she's going to lay eggs, and they're going to raise babies, and they're going to forage, and they're going to build their home. And all that's going on while they're, do they have enough food? Are they able to get this done? So that's one clock. But think about the other clock. I showed you those queen cells inside. So she's left a bunch of workers, and they've got food, and they've got babies. But they need to raise that new queen. And so they still might have a week or so left before she swarms. And then the queen goes out on a mating flight, and a lot of bees follow her, and they all go out in a big swarm, and then she mates, and there's drones kind of flying around. It's interesting that they name them drones, and now we know a lot about drones for other uses, and they're flying around. So these males are just kind of hanging around, just, I'll say, hoping to get lucky. And she will mate maybe once or twice or 3 times, and then that whole swarm of bees comes back to the colony. And then when I talk about the clock that's counting down now, she's mated, she starts laying eggs. They have to raise bees, and they're on a 21-day kind of cycle to start replenishing their workers, and with the new set. So there's like a little gap of time for about 3 weeks until they can raise, more worker bees and keep the colony start replenishing from the fact they just lost half of all their sisters. So that's why I call it kind of two clocks are happening. One with the new hive that's going to end up somewhere in a forest or in somebody's new hive or something like that, and then the new queen that's left with the old hive. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about capturing swarms. And if you're going to do this, and there's all kinds of things that beekeepers do. They might have attractants. There's things that they think attract swarms, and then they might try to attract them right into a new beehive. And but what are they trying to do? They're trying to replenish maybe their own their hives that died during the winter. So I say here, you need to have a plan, or like, what would you do if you capture one of these swarms? And for myself, I know that those winter losses, I want to replace them in my apiary. And then same thing with my neighbors around me. So we'll kind of trade swarms with each other. And maybe somebody says, I'd really like to have like 2 extra colonies this year. And so we'll just kind of be talking and trading swarms and setting each other up and replenishing, the colonies that were lost. And I show this kid here, this young man, a friend of ours, and he had expressed, an interest in getting into beekeeping. So over the winter, he had investigated it and had got some equipment and, had talked to me. And so that's something I like to do. Same thing as, my mentor that got me started. Just kind of, that's another little tradition, just pay it forward. And so last year I had a couple of people that wanted to get started in beekeeping. So I set them up with a swarm and help them get it settled in. So that's something also that happens every year. And then also I will trade swarms with a guy that makes some really nice equipment. Matter of fact, this is some of his equipment here. He's located in Breeze, and he has a pretty thriving business of bees, but he makes some really nice of this hive equipment. And so I'll just text him or call him and say, hey, I got a swarm and about how big it is. And he'll like bring it over and he'll look at it and he'll say, oh, that's worth a new box and a new cover. And I'll say, great, because that's what I need. And that's one of the ways I've kind of taken care of, replenishing my equipment and getting new equipment. So again, you need to have a plan. What are you going to do if you actually do find a swarm and you capture it? Capturing swarms, my mentor showed me how to do it. And like I said, they're very docile, but unluckily they can be in all these crazy places. And so I don't know who this is with the red truck. I wouldn't recommend that. But you can see a setup there and you can see a swarm up high. And even though I don't know what it is, I'll say that we caught this swarm a couple of weeks ago in my neighbor's yard by pulling down the branch. And a lot of times you just get a box under them and you give the branch a shake and you've got a big old ball of bees that falls into the box. And if all's good, you've basically captured it. And again, then here's one on a little apple tree in my neighbor's yard that's just, 6 or 7 feet high and had bee swarm on it a few weeks ago. And in this case, there wasn't even a branch to shake because it was on the main trunk. You can kind of tell that dark outline. And you see, I've got my famous beekeeping spoon here. And I literally just spooned off the bees and I put them in this box. So for beekeeping, basically, here's a box on this truck. You just have a cardboard box and you're trying to capture the bees, including the queen, and kind of faking them out that, hey, this might be a new spot for you until you can get them all together and then put them into a new hive. And again, here's kind of 2 contrasts. Here's one up in this tree, and we got a ladder up there. I'm going to climb up there and shake them into the box. And then here's one, I think I had this picture earlier with them just right there on a short T-post by Lori's garden. This one on the left is the one I was talking about Lori saw last week, and they literally, on a tiny little sapling, that just bent over to the ground. When Lori called me, she says, if you don't get here soon, it's just, to put a box under them, they'll literally just be on the ground. And that day at the same time, I had one down near my bee yard that was all on the trunk of this tree. And I had to take like a drink cup and just cup them off, just a big cup full at a time. And what'll happen, and Lori had this great idea years ago, and we put a white sheet on the ground kind of under the clump, and they'll get on, when you shake them out of the tree, a lot of them are flying around, a lot of them fall to the ground, but it seems like if they have an area to go, they will find, and this is kind of a swarm box that I have, and you may not see it, but there's a hole here, and the bees are, migrating into that hole, and that basically that's the first thing you do when you try to catch a swarm is confirm that you have a queen. And if the queen is in this box, then all those little workers will start smelling her. Some of them literally fan her scent out to everybody. And there's bees flying all around in the air and stuff because you just disturbed that big clump of bees, and they will settle down. It's almost like watching I Dream of Jeannie years ago, and that cloud of bees will just settle into the box, and they all just trying to find her and get back to taking care of her. Again, a couple of evidences of don't try this at home, but sometimes there's just a big swarm of bees. There's a giant swarm up in this tree, and I just can't try to give up on them without trying my best. Don't tell Laurie about these pictures. And sometimes it's nice and easy with just a little step ladder. All right, here's a picture. In this middle picture of this is a pear tree in our near garden, and it gets swarms all the time. And so sometimes they're up in there, and you've got as many as you can. And I'll just leave the box as close up in the air as they are. So, like I said, like this picture on the left, we've just kind of clumped them off into this box, but you see a lot of bees that fly up in the air. They're like, what happened? What happened? And they're trying to find, where did the queen go? And so I try to get the scent near the ones that are left. If they're up on a tree, they'll clump back on that tree because they just know her scent is right there. They don't know where she is, but they know her scent's there. She's been there. And so they'll recongregate while they're trying to figure out, where is she? Where is she? And I'll try to get the box near them so they can smell the queen. And sometimes you just have a giant box full of bees, and they're all just trying to figure out, how are we getting in this box? The queen's in there. What are we going to do? And another crazy setup, but there was an old fella at the LaGrange, Emerald Mound LaGrange that we used to buy bee equipment from. And one of the things we asked him, how do you get them when they're way up in a tree? And he's just like, oh, you just put a peach basket on a big stick. And I tried this last year, and it worked. It was kind of fun. It was a little crazy again, but I put a peach basket on a big long pole and shook them right underneath that swarm that's up here, and luckily had some success and didn't kill myself. I've got capturing a swarm. This is a couple of minutes of this big old swarm. This thing was so big, I just really was trying to figure out how to get a lot of these bees. So like I said, a lot of bees might be up in the air. They're really still not angry or anything. I wear a veil because they're going to bump into you. And they've all just decided, like, what the heck just happened and where's the queen?
Hank, a question from Carla was, do they only swarm in good weather or certain times of the day?
It's really only good weather and kind of the middle of the day is my experience. Any time from about 10:30 till 2:30. But like after they've warmed up in the morning and I don't know, some kind of weather forecast that it's going to be a hot, sunny day. So here I want to keep this going so you can see this thing was a lot of bees, but if you look in general, you'll start seeing that they want to get in that box. The queen is in there. I put this sheet on the ground before I started. And I don't know if I close in on this, but the bees are just making their way into this box. It's kind of neat to watch. And there's some that have just recongregated back on top. They don't know what's going on, but they know her scent's still up there.
Sarah asked, does the queen ever get killed, I guess, during this process?
Yes, that can happen. There's so many bees. And the guy that I trade my swarms with a lot, he'll just search around in there when I bring a swarm to see if he can find the queen. Sometimes he's found 2 queens. But that is a danger because of all this manipulation of them, and that's why I try to be as gentle as I can. But when you give that a big shake of the branch, you're hoping that you didn't just harm the bee. I would say if I've ever done it, it's been just maybe very few times. I wanted to show this picture. It's kind of neat, but there had been a swarm up in this tree. And again, when I got the swarm out in the box, there were a whole lot up still left in the tree. So I set the box up on this ladder so they could smell the queen. And you can see the front of this box just covered with bees. And they're trying to make their way in. There's a little hole down here in the bottom, about the size of a large mason jar lid. And they're just, kind of taking their time to get in there, and she's kind of organizing how they're going to be in there. And I said, like, is the queen, did you get the queen? Is she in the box? You can watch them just streaming in. Queen's in there. They're going to head in there. That is so cool. That's the official Kohl's swarm capture box.
Hank, another question was, once you catch this swarm and you start it, what's the best direction to orientate your hive?
In pretty much everybody always orientates them south just to kind of get that warmth on them. That just seems to be what everybody does. So all of mine face south, the opening, and over the years I've kind of modified that to facing south and in with a lot of sunshine. I used to have them in the shade because it gets really hot in the summer, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But definitely facing south. There you go. All right, so you've got a bee, you got a box of bees. So what do? I got a big box of bees, and it was about noon. And they always will swarm when you have something to do in the afternoon. You're trying to go somewhere, you got a meeting, or you're going to your kid's ball game or something. But when we have a box of bees, my mentor taught me years ago, we don't put them in a new hive until you're getting late in the afternoon, with the theory that it's kind of getting late in the day and the queen's like looking around going, all right, this place looks okay, let's stay here, because you just did all that work, and you'd hate for that queen not to like the new hive and fly away again and repeat the process. You know, if you're lucky, maybe she flies away and you don't find her. And that happened to me week before last. I put them all in a new hive, and before I could even barely step back, they just started pouring out the front of the beehive. It was very unusual. I don't really know what the queen was doing, if there was no queen, had I killed the queen, but I think they went back into another hive. But anyway, these are some pictures from last year with one of our friends that started up with beekeeping, and I brought her a swarm of bees, and I'm just I try to be gentle with them. And you're basically reversing the process of dumping them in from you clumped them off the tree, and you could literally dump them in their new hive. But over the years, I've kind of tried to be more gentle with them. But you see, there's bees everywhere. When you take the lid off, there's usually a ton on the lid. and they've been in that box for a few hours. They actually will start making some comb sometimes. What I like to do now is I put a couple of frames of the wax foundation. I'll put it in with them, and my thinking is that it just gives them something to do and makes them think it's their new home. And then I can take that whole frame of bees out and just gently put it into the new hive.
Gil asked about the bare hands on that one.
Yeah, it took me a long time, but really I've learned that it's easier to work with bees with bare hands. If I'm going to be right in the middle of a big old swarm and doing a lot of stuff, I'll wear gloves. But usually I swear I get stung more on my wrist if I'm wearing gloves. But it's easier. You know, you guys know how it is. You work, it's easier without gloves to do a lot of things. And when they're in this mode, they're very gentle. And so it took me a while. My mentor never wore gloves, or hardly ever. And then I finally realized what he was doing. I usually have them with me if I'm going to do a lot of work in the bee yard, and if they're angry or something. But I'll try to start without that. So here's like a beehive, and I've just unloaded these this swarm in there, and I kind of set the sheet up in front sometimes, and there's going to be a lot of extra bees in there. And same thing, it's a reverse. They want to find that queen, and they start flying around, and you give them 10-15 minutes, and they've all kind of swooped their way in there. And in the picture on the right, I've kind of closed it up. I always start feeding them. Again, it's just kind of, to me, a kickstart in their first week of setting up their new home. I'll put 2 of these sugar water feeders on there, and most of them will start gulping that down within a couple of days, and I'll be replacing that every day. And I just kind of feed them for a week, and I just say, all right, now you're on your own. Let's see. I will tell you that when you're up on top of a ladder and it's a big old swarm, I wrote on my notes here, your adrenaline does get pumping. And that few seconds while you're grabbing the box and grabbing the tree limb and deciding to give it a shake. I know Lori's being pretty quiet right now. But last week there was a swarm out here, and I'm on the ladder, and I said, "Hey, can you video this?" And I'll put it in the presentation. And she had just come back from a bike ride. This is what I'm thinking. She had a bright colored shirt on. I don't know, but she got closer, and I was up there, and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna count to 3 and give them the clump." But I didn't even count to 3. I just went 1, boom, and Lori got stung a couple of times, so that was not fun. And that video is not available for release. Here's a couple of more. I've kept this with the little tractor in the background because sometimes, again, like I said, you got to have a plan. Where are you putting this new hive if you're setting one up? Over the years, I started putting them on these concrete blocks to get them off the ground just a little bit. A lot of beekeepers are trying to figure out one of the pests I'll talk about in a minute, and one of the things is maybe having them off the ground a little bit. And so if I'm bringing blocks and maybe my shovel and gonna, level off a spot for them, that's a little bit of work. And usually that's what I'm doing in the afternoon. So I caught them around noon. I'm gonna put them to bed, 5 or 6 o'clock at night. So in between, you have time to set up, where's the new hive gonna be? Do you have your equipment, kind of thing. Again, here's another one. I'm starting to unload it in the box, and there's just so many bees. They're all just, you end up shaking the box basically on top of this to get the last ones out. Again, here's a picture of one. I've been shaking them out, and they're trying to kind of sort their way down. If you see, here's those frames, the wax foundation frames, and they're just kind of making their way in there and trying to wiggle their way down in there. And there's just bees everywhere while they're doing this. And they're like catching the swarm. You also want to say, is the queen in here? And I have this one little video of like, did the queen is she in her new home?
I'm pretty sure the queen's in there, but it hasn't been a clean dump of bees.
But you could see how they were going in there. And if I looked hard, you'd see there will be little bees. A lot of these bees around the edge, they'll have their little rear ends up in the air, and they're fanning her scent out to everybody. That's their job. And they'll say, "All right, she's in here, and they just start sending out her pheromones out, and that starts attracting the ones that are all just flying around in the air trying to decide where they're supposed to go. And so I'll feed them, like I said, for a week. I'll put another box there. After a week or two, you're kind of looking in there. Are they, is she laying babies? Are they starting to draw out? They call it draw out the wax foundation. And you'll kind of give them a little bit of time. And before they get too crowded, you go, "Hey, look, I'll give you some more room to start making your packing away some honey and some pollen and some things like that." All right. Okay, so we got out of springtime, the busy time, and we're into summer. And really in the summertime, there's not a lot for the beekeeper. I'm going to say that with real quotation marks. So I'll stop here a little bit. In the summertime, or anytime of the year, you'll hear beekeepers talk about what's kind of their policy for inspecting their hives. And my mentor, he likes to get in there and look and dig all the way down. And I showed this in a typical hive setup. This bottom box is what they call the nursery. So if everything was perfect, the queen has laid all her eggs down there on these foundation, and the nursery's down here, and they're raising brood. And it's kind of a constant turnover of new bees being born and hatched out of there, and eggs and larvae developing. And And there's a lot of worker bees assigned to that as nursery workers. And then they always kind of say the second box is the honey box. And so there's a lot of workers that have been out. They're taking what the foragers have brought in, and they're making honey, and they're packing it away, and pollen, and they're drying the honey. And then they cap it with wax, and they fill up the second box. So again, in a perfect world, the second box is full of food for the colony. They're preparing, you know, for winter time and stuff. And then anything past the second box, the third box, you kind of say, oh, that's the beekeeper's honey. So you'll be putting more boxes. You're watching to see, are they filling up boxes? And you'll give them another box. Like, hey, if you got a real productive colony, you see the variety. Some of these, there's more boxes stacked on than others. And so in the summertime, you're watching that, and you'll have some colonies that are very productive. And you know, if they want to keep making honey, you'll just keep stacking empty boxes on there. And I kind of got off track there, but some beekeepers will always be just kind of digging around in the bottom and watching how many eggs she's laying, and is it a good pattern? Are they looking for pests? There's a couple of diseases that happen in beehives, and you can smell it or you can see the signs of it. And so one strategy might be to just always inspect in your, you know, maybe every few weeks looking around in your colonies. And then the other hand would be like just totally hands off. They take care of themselves in nature. So why would you mess around with them? And I would say I'm more somewhere in between, kind of on the end of not messing around with them as much. I had a lesson years ago. I was trying to do this due diligence and look all in there, and I'm taking them all apart. And you feel like you're just tearing apart their house. You feel like you're tearing apart the halls and the doorways. And on this one particular day, I was taking them and looking and in there, and it started raining. And there were so many bees that were outside, and they just couldn't, in my mind, they couldn't get in time. And I lost bees that drowned that day. It was sad. And because I just felt like I'd torn apart their house, and they just had to wait to get back in the house and find the ways in. And so I decided I wasn't going to do that so much. But also, you know, you can ask for an inspection. And so a lot of y'all know Eleanor Schumacher. She is our region's apiary inspector for the state, for the state ag department. And so she'll call me, or I'll call her sometimes, and she'll come over and can do an inspection. And so she'll take a sampling of them, and she will look down in there and look through things. And she's a great source of knowledge, and she knows what's going on all around, you know, her region with other beekeepers, and who's seeing, you know, what kind of problems. And so she's a great resource for that. So she'll come over and do that too. And so you're just kind of watching, like, are there a lot of bees? And the down, you know, one of the downsides of I've observed, I've lost a queen in the summertime, and for whatever reason, she decided to go out. She got snapped up by a bird. Something happened to her, and they call that when the colony goes queenless. They keep working, and they'll even make a little bit of honey, and there'll even be a worker bee lay eggs. They're unfertilized, and so they try to keep life going. And I have found myself, I've been faked out by the fact that I saw bees, and I'll inspect from the top down in the first box or so, and I'll see bees, I'll see things happening, I'll see some honey being made, and a few times by the end of the summer, I've realized, oh, there's no queen, and this hive's not going to make it. And if I had found that early on, maybe I could have done something about it. So that is, I'll say, a downside from not looking as much. But you can tell if you have an infestation. I was going to talk a little bit in the summertime. There's something called small hive beetles that have migrated from the south, and they get in there, and they like to get into the honey, and they like to hide around in there, and the bees try to keep them out. And so you're looking for those. There's all kinds of treatments and things people try for that. And there's also something called Varroa mites, and they have gone around the world as an invasive pest, and they're very tiny, and they get into the larva and they attach themselves to the bees, and they literally kind of suck the life out of the bees. And so a lot of beekeepers will test regularly. So as you work your way through the summer, the mite population will increase. And so they have a way of testing and counting, literally counting how many mites you get out of a sample of bees, to tell if you're at a saturation level that you would want to treat. I don't do that. I've had Eleanor check my bees, and we can tell I don't really have those. It doesn't mean I won't, but kind of our situation where we are, and the fact that my bees all kind of stay within the family, we've gotten good results with not having Varroa mites. And I have tried to avoid using any kind of chemicals in my beehive. So some would say that's kind of naive, or I'm just lucky so far, and I could get a big outbreak of them, and I would really have to treat them with chemicals. And so I'm open to that, but I really tried to be, I'll say, natural beekeeping. And one time we had a presentation. I'm in the Kaskaskia Beekeepers, and we had a presentation, and a guy came down from Springfield, and he was a really cool guy, and he just really believed that a really healthy hive of bees would, yes, have a few hive beetles, yes, would have a few Varroa mites, but they were strong enough to overcome that. And yes, they would have some losses from chemical spraying in the summertime, but a strong beehive would overcome that. And I was always kind of like, well, what is a strong beehive? But I kind of know what he's talking about, in that, you know, bees can overcome a lot, but there are a lot of things that can affect them. So again, we're in the summertime. One of the cool things is you can smell the honey when you walk around out there. When it's really hot day, and you know the bees are making honey. So that's good. You're not worried about feeding them anything. We do try to make sure there's fresh water out there. Lori has a lot of bees who visit her different places with her plants, and she's found that just using really small little pebbles, like from the bottom of an aquarium, that you don't need to see like standing water, but wet rocks, the bees will just get in there and suck that out all day long. So we try to have a bird bath with water and a lot of rocks in there. One thing that's kind of cool in the summertime, the bees come out. I don't know, there's different things they're doing, but one thing they're doing is regulating the temperature in the hive, and they'll just be out, and it's just crazy to see them outside. And I call it like hanging out on the front porch, and they're hanging out all over the house. Sometimes, in this picture, literally, if I had a video, there's a motion going on, and they're actually making wax outside to bring inside. And if you watched them really close, you'd see this little up and down action going. But I've got pictures of these clumping of bees, and sometimes a new beekeeper would be really worried about what's going on here, and I think they're really just regulating the temperature inside the hive. But you see big clumps out here on these different beehives. Now, even at nighttime, this picture on the right is at nighttime, and they're just like, you know, a million bees out here. You know, a bee colony could easily be 50,000 bees in there. Each box could have about 20 to 25,000 bees. All right. We're getting into the last part of the year. If everybody's still awake out there, we're going to get into the fall. Like a lot of things, you know, a lot of y'all that do things, you get to harvest in the fall. So maybe you're going to get some honey, and you're definitely going to want to kind of check on your bees, and you know, if see how they're going to do, make sure they're getting ready for wintertime, and maybe reap the benefits of your beekeeping. So this is just a picture of a drawn out small frame of capped honey. It looks very nice. I've got these grabbers here. That's one thing I learned through the years, and it's easy to hold frames and not squash bees when they're all covered with bees, and not have them want to sting you for grabbing and squashing them. That's a lot of times when I get stung, it's because I accidentally grabbed a bee. Sometimes I get stung by just walking out there and they just flew up and hit me. I do not know why. I don't know if it's a young bee who just didn't know what it was doing. And then sometimes there's bees that just don't want you around. And Lori can tell you about that. In the garden, sometimes she wears a veil, and I'm sure is not very thrilled with the fact that our bee yard is right by the garden. But here I am suited up. So I'll wear a little more gear when I'm gonna mess with taking honey. And you also wanted to show you I have a smoker here. So when I decide I'm gonna harvest honey, I mean, one of the first things I'm gonna do is open up the hive and start making sure, I'll start taking the boxes off, making sure that their box of honey, that they have honey for the winter time. So that's the priority. Do they have a full box? Do I need to move some frames around to make sure they have a full box of honey? I do not want to take something and then leave them hungry for the winter time. And then what I'll do is I'll start taking out these frames and well, I'll back up. I will have given them a good dose of smoke, just grass and leaves in the smoker, and that kind of lulls them into docility, you know, just being easygoing, because when you start tearing apart and taking these frames out, they're going to get kind of excited about that. So you start hitting them with a few puffs of smoke, it calms them down. And really, when I have a brush here, when you brush off bees, they do not like that. And somebody asked me, what is that about? And I said, I don't know. That's like the, you know, like instinctual, like an animal coming after them and coming after the honey. But you brush off the bees because you need to get that frame of honey, you know, into something and back into the house, and you don't need to bring any bees with you. So you're brushing them off, you're hitting them with the smoker, everybody's excited, nobody's happy, and you're kind of happy because you're getting some honey. And those boxes a box full of honey could be 50 or 60 pounds of honey. And so the box can weigh more than that. And so beekeepers use these shorter boxes. And I've got some here. Sometimes they're called mediums or Illinois supers versus a deep super. And I end up, because they're just so heavy, I'll just take my wagon and some coolers, and I'll just take out the frames one by one until it's manageable. And I'll just be putting them into a cooler and covering it with a lid while I go after the next one. And that keeps the bees out, because the bees are all smelling this honey. Some of it's getting torn open, and you know, honey is dripping around, and you're just trying to, you know, keep them home and get your honey. So I took a couple of pictures here just to kind of show you the process of I'll say a hobbyist. When I first extracted honey, I literally squeezed the honeycomb into a cheesecloth, and I was so excited to have a couple of pints of honey for the house. And you realize you don't want to destroy their honeycomb, and there's probably some way to do that. So as I've gotten more honey, my neighbor bought an extractor, and you can just see part of it here, but it'll hold 2 of these frames. And so here's a frame of honey, capped and, you know, very nice. And I've got this little scratching tool, and you're going to want to uncap the wax off all the little cells of honey. So you do that, and they go down into the extractor. This is more of a picture of it. And you see the hand crank. And so you just start spinning those frames around, and it's slinging out the honey out of all the cells into this stainless steel barrel. And you see a spigot at the bottom. So when I have harvested all my honey, I know I'm going to have a few nights in the garage. You in the summertime, you know, this is in the fall, and you want to do it when the honey's still warm, and you're just kind of cranking away. I found that maybe a few cold beverages and Cardinals game on the radio, and you're just kind of enjoying the fruit of your labor. When you first extract, and you got that honey and the wax on this middle picture is a good kind of a good picture, but the first part of what's in the bottom of this tub is going to have honey and wax and bee parts and just a lot of stuff. And so in these 5-gallon barrels, there are filters, there's screens. And in general, I always screen mine in 3 different size screens. So from a little bigger hole down to a tiny hole. And so I'll screen them. And basically the first screening, you have some beautiful honey. And by the second one, it's just really nice. So you just have a little process going of continually going through the 3 barrel process buckets. And in the end, you just have some really beautiful, beautiful honey. So my neighbor lets me borrow this extractor. A big commercial guy would have, you know, a motorized, and been over and seen one guy had one. He could put like 12 or 15 frames in with a big motor and a big operation, uncapping all the frames of honey and spinning it all out. And that's what the guys who are in the commercial business will do that. After you've finished all that, of course, you got honey, and I'll just put it in bottles, and we just in jars. We just keep all kinds of jars here, and I've got a picture here of some jars. And over time, this is in our basement, so like against the wall of the basement, over time the honey will crystallize, which is, you know, nothing wrong with it. And I might just put it in the oven at the lowest setting just to kind of have it come back out of the crystallization. And I do bottle some of the honey, and like I said before, I sell honey in town, and so I have to have a little process going to bottle it, label it, and replenish the stock down at the couple of places that sell my honey. And then, and I'm telling you, when you're doing all this, anybody who has honey knows it becomes a sticky mess. But one of the neat things is when you're all done with this and you've got all these buckets and filters and the extractor, I just set it outside and let the bees clean it all up. And again, you'll have thousands of bees come around, and just give them the day, and they just clean it all up.
Cleanup action here.
And maybe I get in trouble for having it too close to the house. And then I'll take my little extractor back to my neighbor and give it back to him. All right, so that was kind of the fun part of getting the honey out in the fall. Then there's a few chores to do in the fall, and I just wanted to highlight this picture. One of the things my mentor swears by, and he got me doing, is we try to create a windbreak around the hives. So here's the hive facing south. So here's a west side and a north side. And I'll use some of our old hay bales, or I literally just drive around town and get bags of leaves in the fall. When people rake up their leaves, I ride around and snag a truck full at a time. And then I come back and I put these around our hives. And then in the spring, you know, we just have the leaves for our compost pile and whatever we're going to use. And then also down here, let's see if you can see it, a little mouse trap, a little wire guard mouse trap, not trap, a mouse guard. Because when it gets cold, the mice like to get in here. And I've had mice get in my hives, and they can make a big mess out of things. They love the honey. So you try to make sure before you start having frosty nights that you're taking care of that. There's a little better picture of the mouse guard.
Nancy asked, how do you protect from bigger predators?
That's a good question. Sometimes like in the spring when I'm feeding them that syrup, the raccoons come around. That's a real pain when they finally discovered the sugar water. And then I ended up going out there every night taking away the sugar water. Some guys swear, and in the winter and the fall, I can go out there and find these little bricks, you know, knocked off and things. And so they say skunks and raccoons try to get in there. And sometimes they say if you have what they call a hot hive, like the bees are angry, that might be the sign that they've been getting bugged at night by like a skunk. And so, but I haven't really had to do anything more than that. I have never had them, like, you know, there's people around in the country who actually literally have like electric fences for bears and things because they have to protect their hives. We don't have that here, and I've never had anything larger than raccoons or skunks. So I have never had them, you know, like tip over a hive or do anything more than knock down some bricks. So I do have to walk through there and do that because I like to keep, you know, the cold drafts out of there. And here's kind of a picture, you know, you can see all the bags of leaves. It's not very pretty. But again, we just try to see if we can help them a little bit in the winter with the cold north winds and things. Oh, I forgot to. Also in the fall, once I've done all the honey and everything like that, I will feed them again. Sometimes I don't really take very much, but it kind of depends on what the summer was like. If you had a dry summer and things weren't blooming very late, and really all you've got is the goldenrod kind of things in the fall, then we like to give them a little bit of a shot of some syrup in the fall. And again, just trying to help them beef up their stores for the winter. And again, just what kind of summer did we have? And I probably backing up when we're talking about them making honey, and I said, oh boy, are they cranking things out? It really does depend on, you know, what's blooming and how dry it got. And because when at some point in the summer, the queen just says, we're not making any more honey. There's just not really enough out there to do all that work. So I guess for us as gardeners, when you think about, you know, I've seen some really cool, those calendars. I think, Gail, you handed one out that showed all these things that bloom at different times of the year, and pollinators like that. You can't just focus on, you know, a bunch of flowers in the spring. I thought that was really cool to see that, because these guys need to eat all year round. So the things that bloom late in the fall are really very helpful to them. And then one last thing is you take away all these empty boxes. So between the honey and I'll have, you know, I'll be ever hopeful that they're going to make more honey there in the summer. So there will be boxes they have not touched. But what you're trying to do is kind of reduce how much space they have to keep warm in the winter time. So as part of that process, after I take the honey and things, I'll be seeing what kind of empty boxes we have, and you're kind of putting that all away. Oh, and a little side thank you to my kids. You know, so some years ago, we were like, why are all the bee boxes just white? And how do they know which one to come home to? And so I did a little research and quickly figured out they need some markers and some cues on how to get back to their hive, besides just the smell of their queen. And so my kids started painting my hive. So you noticed all of them, and that's become a Father's Day and just gifts from my kids and some creativity. I tell them I don't care. I don't have any requirements of colors or designs or anything, just whatever they want to do. So that's kind of it. That's a year. I decided I better give a plug for Pollinator Week coming up. And there's a lot of things I saw online with that. And I think I've heard Chris and Gail talking about that too. And one last little cartoon. And that is all that I have. I'm open to any other questions or comments or whatever.
Thank you, Hank, for helping us out today. One more question that did come in. Nancy asked, have you ever used straps to keep them together?
No, I haven't. They really kind of glue their boxes together. There's something called propolis, and the bees make that. And you really have to pry the boxes apart to get them. But I will, you see guys strap them together to hold them when they're going to move hives around. Sometimes y'all might see they take just truckloads of hives to different places like the almond orchards in California. I mean, that beekeepers can make a lot of money moving their hives around to pollinate things, and they will strap them down to make sure they don't fall apart.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to unmute real quick? Do you have any questions before we wrap it up?
I know I've talked way too much.
Hank, this is Bill. Quick question. You said that you put your hives on cement blocks.
Yes.
Is that to protect them from predators, or what's that?
Part of it was the small hive beetles land in the ground, and the larva goes down into the soil, and then they come out. And even though they can fly, that's just a little bit of like making it a little harder for them to find their way up into the hive. And so, and also just to make it easier for bending over. and weed eating, using the weed eater around them. So I've just found I just get them off the ground a little bit, and it kind of seems to help a little bit. But in the wintertime, I like to block that wind from going under there. So I might, use those wind blocks and stuff some leaves under there.
Okay.
Any other questions? Carla, do you have any questions?
I'm just curious, Hank, if you walked away tomorrow and you weren't there to tend to your bees, what happens if they swarm? Would they are they adapted to surviving in our Illinois winters?
My mentor swears that they do not have a very good success rate when they fly off into the wild. I don't know how that's measured, but that swarm would find a home somewhere, out in the woods. So I hope they're successful. Like I said, my neighbor down the street swears that they do not have a very good success rate when they're on their own, but I can imagine, I don't know why not. I don't know why they wouldn't be successful to go find a cavity and a snag and just start setting up house.
Thank you. It was very interesting, Hank. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed it.
All right.
Laurie, I have a question for you. Do you enjoy, he was saying you were having trouble with the garden being so close. Do you ever feel like you should have moved the beehive away, like the bee, yard away from the garden, or is it just beneficial having all the extra pollinators?
I would say in the beginning, when there was just 1 or 2 hives, really, we didn't have a problem at all. And now that we have so many more, it's probably just the, like the law of averages or something. And you just get somebody kind of coming up and wanting to get in your face. It's not that they, necessarily are going to be aggressive, but I do try to wear like a white, like a white men's shirt, something light like Hank wears when he works with the bees. And I always wear a hat because I don't want somebody just getting kind of tangled in my hair, getting a little too close. And then once they try to get out, as they scramble around in your hair, they're just going to basically kind of pull themselves closer and closer to your scalp, which isn't, doesn't end well. So I wear a hat. And if I do find that somebody's kind of getting up and buzzing in my face and kind of challenging me, I'll come back and just put that little veil on and go back out there. And usually once they realize they can't kind of like, bug you by getting in their face, they can't get close enough, then they'll just lose interest and go away. So it depends on how much time. If I'm having a very relaxed day and I have plenty of time, it's no problem. But if I'm really trying to get something done and there's somebody buzzing in my face, then yes, it's a little bit more annoying. But I wouldn't. We like the bees. And I would just throw one more thing out there. We really kind of thought about this when we set up the young man who was interested in getting Hive last year. They live in O'Fallon and just have your typical kind of suburban house and neighborhood with no special landscaping or anything more than the average kind of house. But I always forget the exact number, but it takes like 1 million flower visits to make like I think a pound of honey. It's something like that. It's definitely in the millions, and it's just for 1 pound of honey. And so, I'm just going to put a plug in for, people don't like dandelions and maybe they don't like white clover in their yards, but that is definitely what that beehive in their neighborhood lives on. They have kind of an open common area that is just full of white clover. And it's, and that's, the bees have, there have to be ththings for the bees to forage. And so I'll just put that plug in out there, like when you see white clover, you see dandelions and you think, I don't want that in my yard. That is absolutely what, these bees are flying and trying to find whatever they can, because they need a lot of flower visits to make, a little bit of honey.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And thank you guys for putting together the presentation. Hank has his shirt on. I will tell you, instead of grabbing black, I did kind of grab yellow today, not even thinking about it, but the Beekeeper, that looks good. Gail, do you have anything to add before we close out today?
No, it was really, really fun to watch. My husband called in the middle and I was holding the phone up to the computer while I was watching to hear the swarms and whatnot. So we enjoyed it. Kathy Kingsley wanted to just make sure you knew how much she enjoyed it, but she's heading out to Texas. So I just wanted to pass that on. It's great.
Right. Thank you guys again, Hank and Lori, for helping us out and all the great videos and everything. May 20th is our next program. That's going to be at 2 p.m. with Peggy Doty. And Gail, it's on Birding 101, Backyard Birding 101. Is that correct?
Yeah, what makes a bird a bird? A lot of people through the COVID, especially being home, have noticed a lot of birds in their yard that they don't normally see, especially through migration, which we have had 2 through COVID, at least spring and then coming up fall. And so she's going to help us out to how to identify a bird. I get a lot of pictures of people wanting to know, and she's going to give us some tips on that. So, and she's great for anybody who hasn't heard Peggy Doty. She's one who's done some of the webinars this summer, one on coyotes. She did one on the 7 woodpeckers of Illinois. She's done one on owls. She's very, very knowledgeable. So if you got questions and whatnot, she'll just dive in and help you out with that. So registration's open on our website. I'd love to show support for her in addition to getting us all smarter. So please take time to sign up for that and pass that on. If anybody's a member of an Audubon Society or a nature group outside of our immediate area, by all means, share it. And who was asking a question?
Sarah Lee.
I wanted to know, that was my question. I have a friend who I think would like to do it. She's not with the extension or anything. If I sent her email to you, could you send her like a link?
I'd be glad to. Yeah, the link is,
Okay.
and then she can share it. We're definitely open to the public. So by all means, by all means.
And our next
Okay, I'll do that then.
And Sarah Lee's on. Our next Lunch and Learn is June the 8th, and the topic will be the Rusty Patch Bumblebee. And Sarah's going to kind of help us out with her, give us some information from her niece on how she has a certified Rusty Patch Bumblebee habitat. So that will be June the 8th at noon. Thank you again, Hank, Lori. We appreciate everything you guys did for us, and it was a great presentation today about bees.
It really was. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Great.
All
And
right.
it is recorded, so I believe Chris will get that squared